Since we talked about the awkward years of Katniss Catnip Everdeen, I feel like it's my civil obligation to talk about the very uncomfortable and disturbing teenage years of Coriolanus Snow. If you're Tigris and if you're cool, you can also call him Coryo. I'm also gonna basically go over the entire history of the rise and the fall of Snow. Do you get it? Because like snow falls. Snow's this guy right here, would go on to become the future president / dictator of Panem. And he would go on to have more beef with Katniss than I do with people who go like, hey, see you next year when it's New Year's Eve. Anyway, let's start with the early days. Young Coriolanus had it rough to say the least. And to say the most, around the time of the 10th games, he lived in the Snow's family penthouse with Tigris, a very talented seamstress, and Grandmam, who is often described as fossilized. This right here, this place that we're currently in right now, it was one of the best penthouses in the capital. But the dark days took a toll on it. Needless to say, it could use some renovations. And back in its glory days, it was full of elegant furniture and books, like a lot of books. Even picture books of Coriolanus's family that he used to look over with his mother. The rooms have none of that stuff now. In fact, most of them barely have any furniture in it, and some rooms are as empty as my soul. They don't have any furniture because they either had to burn it or trade it over the years for stuff like, I don't know, food. And a lot of it was burned during the siege's final winter, because that was an incredibly cold winter and they ran out of resources and they still had to keep warm. And tragically, the things that they did end up burning were the Snow's family photos. It's truly the richest to rags story that we're all inspired by. Coriolanus was a spitting image of his father, Crassus Xanthos Snow. We're just gonna pause this video for a second because I just need to reiterate the fact that Suzanne Collins loves Greek names more than I love telling debt collectors that I'm gonna sue them for harassment if they keep calling me. The people of each district have names associated with their industry. For example, the luxury district has more materialistic names like Glimmer and Gloss. And District 4, the fishing district, has more aquatic names like Coral or Finnick. And as for the capital, they have mostly Greek names. Crassus was most likely named after that one Roman general, Marcus Licinius Crassus. For those who didn't dedicate an entire month to studying the fall of Rome and annoying their friends about it endlessly, Marcus Crassus was known to be one of the richest men in Rome, which is fitting because Snow's father, Crassus, used to be an incredibly wealthy munitions tycoon. Roman general Marcus Crassus fought in Sulla's civil war under Lucius Cornelius Sulla, a war against the Cinna Marius factions. And now I kind of know why the fashion designer who basically created the Mockingjay is named Cinna, even though this dense war hero was a trust fund baby and simply continuing the family business of selling weapons. Crassus enhanced his legitimacy in the family business by signing up for the military and joining the Peacekeepers. Apparently, he was described as a really good head of strategy. He had nerves of steel and a commanding presence, as he was quickly climbing the ranks, all starting with him stealing the Hunger Games idea from Isaac Highbottom. You know what? Everything was going pretty well for Crassus for a bit there, until he lost the ability to live due to the fact that he died, losing his life while defending the capital during the First Rebellion. We don't know too much about his death, other than the fact that it was caused by a rebel bullet, and in the film they add the line,
"It was a rebel, they say, a trap out in the forest in 12.
So that's like all the information I'm working with right now. The general's life was reduced to one of the many names that were streaming on TV during December 15th, also known as National Heroes Day. And to take a break from all that happiness for a second, I feel like it's a good time to talk about today's sponsor, BetterHelp, also known as the world's largest therapy service. A therapy service that's 100% online. The number one thing that I hear from everyone and their neighbor is that finding the right therapist can be a challenge, to say the least. So BetterHelp, having over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists, would probably help with that search. BetterHelp's out here on a mission to make therapy more affordable and accessible. And if I'm being like 127.9% honest with you, I really like the online aspect of it. That way, you know, it can fit with my very busy schedule of staying at home all day. All you gotta do is answer this questionnaire, this thing right here, specifically talking about your needs and preferences in therapy. And then BetterHelp over here is gonna match you with a personalized therapist from their network. And then after that, you can talk to your therapist over text, chat, video call, voice call, just whatever you feel comfortable with. And then you can message them literally whenever. 24/7 people, as well as scheduled live sessions when it's convenient for you. And let's say you did all the steps that I just explained, and then you get your therapist, and your therapist is pretty cool, but you feel like they're just not the right fit. Not a problem, because you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you're getting the same professionalism and quality that you're getting from in-office therapy, but with a therapist that's custom picked for you. But the difference is that you're getting more flexibility and a more affordable price. And if all that sounds pretty good, you can get 10% off your first month by clicking on this link in the description below. And anyway, back to the very dour history of Snow's family. Snow's mom, also commonly known as Coriolanus Snow's mother, she also didn't do so well. The only pictures that I could find of her were of her next to the munitions tycoon husband in the stained glass portraits mounted above the doorways, depicting her and Crassus smiling while holding baby future dictator of Panem. Around the time of the death of Crassus, there was an air raid that immobilized the city, which was a really inconvenient thing for Snow's mother, mainly because she went into labor and she had to get to the hospital like quick. And if you're one of those people that's like, hey honey, get in here. Bryce keeps referring to Snow's mother as Snow's mom and not by her full name. And honestly, it's freaking me out. Well, Matthew, that's gonna freak out some Matthew out there. But seriously, Emily, much like Katniss's mom, Snow's mother didn't have a first name. They didn't give her a full name in the books. Not having access to a hospital was especially bad for this woman lacking a first name because she had complications. We don't know exactly what the complications were, but it was suspected that they were hemorrhages. Maybe. Grandmam and the Snow's family cook tried to stop the bleeding, and they failed mainly because the Snow's family cook was like, I'm just a cook. I'm not a doctor. I mean, my parents wanted me to go to med school, but I wanted to pursue my dream of becoming a Norwegian nightclub DJ. And when that failed, I became a cook, meaning I'm twice as unprepared for this situation as a normal cook. During this very dour moment, Tigris took Snow and brought him out of the room, as she didn't want Coriolanus to witness his mother's death. That night, Snow lost his mother and what would have been his sister. And for those wondering what Snow's grandfather was up to, I honestly couldn't tell you. He didn't really do anything worth noting other than just being one of those people that fights against the districts. And that's all the information we have on that old timer. Let's just take a break from all this happiness so I can introduce the main question that I want to answer in this unnecessarily long video. And that would be, why is Snow the way he is? Or you know what, I can word that better. Why did Snow decide to turn against Lucy Gray? Like seriously, what in the gem of Panem was that? One moment Snow's in love with the girl, and then the next moment he's all like pew pew. Now I'm not familiar with the cool young hip yeetable vernacular of today's nihilistic youth, but I'm just gonna go ahead and assume that what Snow did is a big red flag. Anyway, to answer my own question, after the war, when the remaining Snows were no longer occupied with not starving, not dying, and avoiding cannibals at all costs, they were still suffering. Remember earlier in this video when I mentioned that the Snows played a huge role in the capital's munitions industry? It used to be an incredibly wealthy munitions. Well, get this. The bulk of Snow's family fortune was invested into munitions manufacturing in District 13, which at the time was the main military base for the capital. But with District 13 starting the first rebellion and then just getting annihilated from starting the first rebellion, 13's entire industry was transferred over to District 2. So people like Strabo Plinth could make bank while rebuilding the capital's military. In a sense, all of Snow's fortune was taken from the Snow family and then just immediately given to the Plinths. During his later teen years, Coriolanus spent most of his time in his room, cuddling the ever-living heck out of this stuffed puppy, or spending time at his desk studying and playing the part of an overachiever. And by the time he was 18, the rest of his family were being overflooded with overdue notices and threats of losing their penthouse. Naturally, this was making it harder for Coriolanus to maintain this facade that he was swimming in dough. He was pretty successful, as you saw at the beginning of Songbirds and Snakes, but, you know, he didn't really have everyone convinced.
Makeshift shirt and your too tight shoes, trying desperately to fit.
But it's fine, because Grandmam and Tigris were giving Snow the support that he needed when he was attending the academy. Grandmam would do stuff like teach Coriolanus how to sing properly, and at the end of every single line, she would just immediately poke Coriolanus in the ribs with a ruler, screaming, "Breathe!" Also, that Coriolanus could sing the Gem of Panem adequately during Arachne Crane's funeral, in order to enhance his political career. Everyone in the capital was incredibly judgmental of everyone else. It's a society where new is always better. So Tigris, this person, being a talented seamstress, went on to renew Coriolanus' dad's clothing for Reaping Day. And even though she killed it, when arriving at the academy, Snow still had to defend himself for the whole renewing his dad's old clothes.
That's a snazzy shirt. What are those buttons? Tesserae?
Needing to remind everyone that his father, the general, wore that mesh dress shirt as part of his outfit that used to be just decked out in medals. In times of hardship, Tigris often recited the Snow's family motto, "Snow lands on top."
Snow lands on top.
And Grandmam was constantly on another plane of existence, as she was caught up in the good old glory days of Panem. Like, she was very patriotic. She would sing Gem of Panem every single morning. And according to Coriolanus, she was absolute trash.
Perhaps a little sharp today.
Even in the books, they claim that she's painfully off-key, always missing high notes, and slightly behind tempo. The constant grandma shade in Songbirds and Snakes is unparalleled. Tone deafness aside, Grandmam is the grandmother of Coriolanus and Tigris. They call her Grandmam because the Snows are inherently pretentious. They thought that the classics like Grandma and Nana, they were just insufficient, especially for someone so imperial. The imperial grandma had 2 kids, the father of Tigris and the father of Coriolanus, but they all died during Rebellion number 1. So Grandma the Imperial was left with the task of looking after the grandkids. Well, honestly, it actually ended up kind of being the other way around. I mean, don't get me wrong, Coriolanus credited his moral and literal survival to his grandmother, mainly due to her foresight early in the war. She did stuff like breaking the law by hoarding a bunch of lima bean crates that they would go on to hide in the walls of their penthouse. But as previously established, the Snows used to have cooks and servants, which is why Grandma was as patriotic as the sun, as she lived such a privileged lifestyle. Unfortunately, this caused her to lack many basic adult skills, like how to cook for herself and her family. Though Grandmam was burdened with the responsibility of looking after these 2 lima beans, she didn't really know how to do anything. Meaning at the age of 8 years old, Tigris had to grow up real quick, as she had to learn how to operate this puppy so that she could take the really disgusting sounding lima beans, cabbage, or bread so that she could form it into a stew or a soup or watery broth to keep the family alive during the war. And all of this peasant food was ironically eaten over fine china. Then fast forward a little bit to the future. So Tigris wasn't going to university. So in a way, it was kind of up to Coriolanus to return glory to his family name. As time went on, Coriolanus would grow to have a lot in common with Katniss Everdeen, as he was in survival mode his entire life. They both had to protect a mother figure and a sister figure while being burdened with poverty, starvation, and of course, the games. But we'll talk more about that in a second. And speaking of people dressed like Mike Tyson's tiger, even though Tigris is Coriolanus' cousin, they still treated each other like brother and sister. She was about 3 years older than Coryo, and she graduated from the same academy that he was going to. Tigris was a very talented seamstress, and around the time of the 10th games, she was working for Fabricia Whatnot, a woman who's apparently as ridiculous as her name. Tigris didn't care to go to university after graduating from the academy. She was more interested in pursuing her dream of becoming a designer. Tigris's apprenticeship for Whatnot did not pay her a living wage, which is why the burden of earning the Plinth Prize and going to university fell on Coryo. It was utter trash because Whatnot made Tigris do things that were not part of her job description, like giving Whatnot a bunch of foot massages or cleaning clumps of disturbingly long magenta hair out of the drains. Honestly, I don't know which one is worse. Anyway, why is any of this important? Oh yeah, so during the 10th games, Tigris gave Coriolanus a small cake of soap that was shaped like a flower and smelled of lavender, as well as an old dress of hers that Coriolanus could give to Lucy Gray. She didn't want Lucy Gray to look like some trash can district dweller during her appearance in the Hunger Games A Night of Interviews. We don't know too much about Coriolanus and Tigris' relationship after his return to the capital, so we don't know a lot about their downfall. But we know for certain that from the moment Tigris gave Coryo that soap and dress, she became the first stylist of the games. She would then go on to become an official stylist for future tributes, fulfilling a role like Cinna's, as it becomes her job to make the tribute look like metaphorical and sometimes literal fire before sending them into a death pit in the most fashionable way possible. It's not specified which district Tigris was assigned to, but it was most likely either districts 1 or 2. However, at some point in the future, Tigris eventually got banned from the games by Coriolanus himself. Snow would kill off anyone he deemed to be a threat, or even anyone he thought may be a threat in the future. But obviously he still loved and cared for Tigris, so he probably thought to himself, Okay, we're not gonna do the usual plan. Even though they had a falling out, he still made sure Tigris was okay. It's hard to say if Snow ruined Tigris's entire life or reputation at all, but I don't think he did, as Tigris was still running a shop 5 blocks from the city circle, which is right next to Snow's mansion, so Snow was pretty keen on keeping her close. Tigris's removal from the games was most likely due to political, moral, and philosophical differences that she had with Coriolanus. The same differences that later caused Tigris to become friends with the capital trader, also known as the Propo director, Cressida, and former Gamemaker Plutarch Heavensby, so that she could aid District 13 during the Second Rebellion. Tigris was one of the stylists mentioned in the books to have surgically altered themselves to the point of grotesqueness. Katniss's opinion, not mine. Tigris became a literal tiger, and even went as far as incorporating feline traits into her verbal communication, going on to replicate growls of fierce jungle cats like that of buttercups. She would also eat next to nothing, well, except for raw meat, which is really disturbing. Upon seeing her for the first time, Katniss viewed Tigris as the embodiment of the capital's shallowness, as Katniss would go on to call her decrepit tiger woman. Not to her face, obviously. Luckily, during this encounter, Tigris didn't feed Katniss and the rest of Squad 451 raw meat, but instead she served them hashed chopped ham and potatoes. She also dressed them all up as capital citizens to avoid any detection by peacekeepers. Tigris was the first one to style Lucy Gray, and for that reason, I think it's fitting that she'd be the last one to style the remaining victors during the unofficial 76 Hunger Games. I always asked myself, why did Tigris make this radical transformation? Being the first unofficial and official stylist of the games made Tigris somewhat responsible for the shallow culture and over-the-top fashion trends in the capital. Therefore, it makes sense as to why she would be the one to take it to the most extreme point. We know that a lot of people involved with the games, even game makers like Plutarch, had their ethical differences with the capital. And from the beginning, Tigris didn't fully support the games. Tigris hated Gaul from the moment Clemencia was bit by that rainbow snake mud, which is a pretty reasonable reason to hate someone. After the arena bombing, devoted capital citizens like Grandmam hated the tributes like Lucy Gray, even though people like Lucy Gray went on to go save Coryo's life. Grandma the Imperial's reasoning was that she assumed Lucy Gray decided at some point that the peacekeepers would gun her down if she ran. And apparently during the same attack, Jessup went to go protect Lysistrata by throwing his body over her, turning himself into one big human shield. So Tigris would go on to defend these two tributes, telling her grandma perhaps the people of District 12 aren't quite as bad as you paint them to be, and that both Jessup and Lucy Gray have behaved bravely. Tigris was on Lucy Gray's side from the beginning, putting herself in her shoes and imagining how terrified Lucy Gray must have been, how alone she must have felt, and repeatedly pointed out to Coriolanus that Lucy Gray was obviously a good person. In fact, Tigris stayed up all night making her bread pudding drizzled in corn syrup and told Coryo to take a piece to her because Lucy Gray said that she likes sweet things. So far we've seen some of the victors, even people like Dean Highbottom, turn to Morphling as a way of coping with their involvement with the games. Some tributes are even nicknamed after the Morphling, like the Morphlings. Oh, right. I'm gonna address the controversy surrounding the Morphlings. In my last video, I referred to the Morphlings as this. Both of them were bone thin and looking like emo kids in their 30s. Emo kids in their 30s. And some people thought that my use of emo kid in their 30s was derogatory. And I just want to clarify that it wasn't, and that I am in fact an elder emo. I am one of you. Anyway, other victors like Haymitch turned to drinking as a form of coping as well. So I feel like Tigris made these alterations to herself as an alternative method of coping with the whole aiding in the games and helping the most corrupt person in the capital rise to power. At the end of the day, maybe she was just expressing herself and catering towards her own style. I try not to judge. It's funny how nowadays the artists preaching about being yourself and expressing yourself are usually the ones with the most generic lyrics. I think it goes without saying at this point that everyone in the capital, from evil Santa Claus to the pink dogs, they hate. I mean, they loathe the district-born savages. Hating them more than I hate having to set my alarm for 7 a.m. when I just got into bed at 4:30 a.m. and I'm hit with the existential dread that I have to go into work the next day and repeat this perpetual never-ending cycle of monotony and boredom fueling my own personal health. At the time, Tigris showing the district dwellers sympathy was an anomaly. During the dark days, Snow was having a bad day. He got his cabbage stolen from him. The Peacekeeper bruised his jaw when he mistakenly wandered too close to the president's mansion. And then, to top it off, he collapsed in the street, lying unconscious due to the swan flu. It's like the swine flu, but bird-themed. When Coryo passed out, no one stopped to help him. But then, out of the darkness, Tigris, who was sick with the swan flu herself, left their apartment to find Coryo and carry him home. Also, in the books, it's implied that Tigris went through some unspeakable things to provide for her family. There's a moment where Tigris kind of snapped at Coriolanus as he was judging people like Lucy Gray for choosing between death and disgrace. And Tigris over here had to choose the more disgraceful option in order to keep Coryo alive. At the end of the day, all of this stuff strengthened their bond, but worsened Coriolanus' relationship with the rebels, aka all of the districts, and especially 12. The rebels were also the reason he has no money or parents. So there's that. Coriolanus always saw things in black and white. He didn't see the gray until he met Lucy Gray. Which brings me to the main point of the video, or at least one of the main points of the video, which is answering the question, did Snow truly love Lucy Gray? When Lucy Gray claims,
the guards say you get money if you get more people to watch, and you say you want to help me. Which is it?
I think that was the most important question in the movie. Well, besides the whole questioning the structure of our modern world and the political commentary and criticism of our Western society and blah, 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 blah. Snow answers Lucy Gray's question, claiming it's both. He wants the money, but he also wants to, you know, take her on a date. At the end of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the movie cuts to black, and then the voice of the old Snow comes in claiming,
It's the things we love most that destroy us.
That quote is open to multiple interpretations, but the route that I'm going with right now is that Lucy valued trust more than she valued love, in a sense, and Snow valued his reputation and life in the capital more than he valued love. I've heard I've heard a lot of people claim that Snow attacking Lucy Gray really did just come out of nowhere. And let me tell you this, buddy, for those who think that, I disagree. Throughout the entire film, Snow is at odds with himself, constantly torn between two worlds, or two lives. In what should have been a 4-hour movie, there are so many moments hinting at Snow's final decision. It also helps to read the books, so we're gonna reference the heck out of the books to validate my argument. So buckle up. It starts with this moment. During the first rebellion, the districts that produced the food, like districts 4, 9, 10, and 11, cut off the fat cat's food supply, meaning everyone in the capital began starving. It was not ideal. Some capital residents chose the not chill route of cannibalism, and there was a moment where Tigris and Coriolanus were trying to scavenge some wooden crates that they spotted in an alleyway, but then they accidentally stumbled onto a horror movie. That beginning clip that we see at the beginning of Songbirds and Snakes is of Coriolanus watching Nero Price, a former titan in the railroad industry, pushed to the point where he was willing to eat his fellow citizen. This moment was burned into Snow's memory and showed him what lengths civilized people will go to when they are desperate for food. And ever since the dark days, Coriolanus had an endless dance with hunger that defined his life, because it says so right there in the books. Whatever food he could get his grubby little hands on, whether it would be food from home or the academy, it was never enough. By the time he was in his late teens, Snow was convinced that no one would ever let him have enough, and for that reason I find it interesting that former District 2 inhabitant Sejanus Plinth was Coryo's best friend. Sejanus had everything Snow didn't. He had the inheritance, the clothing, the candy, and of course, the sandwiches. Everyone in the capital unanimously agreed that the District-borns were savages. But Coriolanus, being friends with the supposed savage, really showed off this compassionate side to him. According to makeup artist V. Neal, when developing Snow's look for the first Hunger Games movie and what should have been a trilogy, yeah, I think Mockingjay should have been just one big 4-hour movie. I will die on this hill. Anyway, Neal claimed that they thought the beard made Snow look like the devil, and Neal made note of Donald Sutherland having these insanely blue eyes, stating how bad guys usually have dark eyes. But Donald over here has the hugest blue eyes you've ever seen, so those piercing blue eyes and that evil look is really a fantastic combination. Young Snow had this golden blonde hair, aka the curls, just like his father, and honestly, he was a spitting image of his father. Grandmam would constantly tell him how much his pale blue eyes were just like Crassus. Coriolanus never outwardly said this, but he wished that he had his mother's eyes, which were not pale blue, though he often assumed that maybe it was best to take after his father, since his mother had not really been tough enough for this world. And I feel like that right there, this thing that I'm showing you, sums up Snow's internal conflict better than anything else that's shown in the films or written in the book. Snow wanted to be like his mom, the caring, compassionate human being, but when asked to list something that he had in common with her, the only thing thing that Snow could think of was that he and his mom both had this love for music, which wasn't entirely true. In fact, Snow did not have her singing capabilities. This shows when he performs the Gem of Panem at Arachne Crane's funeral. His singing was more like a sustained talking rather than a melodic tour de force. Snow didn't know his mother too well. She died when he was really young. All that he had left of her was this stained glass depiction hanging above the doorway, this scarf, as well as a normal photograph of her holding baby Coryo in her arms. There was also the compact. His mother would keep this thing in her handbag at all times, but now rests in Coryo's drawer, next to his nightstand in close proximity with the puppy. Engraved on the silver case of this thing is the poem "Roses are red, love, violets are blue, birds in the heavens know I love you." Every time Coriolanus opened the compact, he could sense her presence by taking in the rose-scented powder that she wore on her person. The scent would envelop him each night, like a warm, fuzzy security blanket. And when it came to other people, the compact reminded Dean Casca Highbottom of Mrs. Snow's vapidness and how she was fated to be a child forever. They both had very different opinions when it came to Mrs. Snow. Coriolanus' father's death was associated with this fear and vulnerability that Coriolanus had never been able to shake off. And the more Coriolanus was pushed, the more he became like his father. Think of it this way, so the Dark Days happened, we know that. Coriolanus lost so much, and now he's about to lose literally everything. However, the one thing that can save him and his family would be the Plinth Prize. It was a good chunk of cheddar. Some scholars would say that it was a lot of monies. If Snow won the Plinth Prize, it would pay for university, as well as make it so that he could keep paying off that penthouse. So for 10 years, Coriolanus didn't miss a day of school. He got perfect grades, became a hall monitor, probably, and he exhaustingly maintained this facade that he was still wealthy. Doing all of this for a decade only to figure out in like an instant that it's not happening. That the Plinth Prize is no longer being determined by who got the best grades, but instead who is the best mentor to their tribute. Look, I know you know all of this, but I'm just reiterating these facts so I can remind you of how much Snow had on the back burner. It put a lot of pressure on him and kept him in the survival mode that's been activated since the Dark Days. He had to turn his tribute into a spectacle, something he didn't really know how to do. I like that one moment during the reaping where Snow jolts out of his seat after watching Lucy put the snake down Mayfair's shirt. In this moment, he subconsciously experiences the effects of watching a good performer, how she was able to captivate the audience, including Snow himself. But don't get me wrong, Snow still looked at Lucy Gray as unfed and unstable, but he still needed to pass his assignment. And back in the day, in order to publicly display their commitment to the capital, the Snow family would all travel down to the train station to await Crassus's return. Coriolanus would wear his velvet suit to await his father's return, and they kept repeating this until one day his father didn't return, because of the whole dying situation. This is where Coriolanus got the idea to greet his tribute at the station, a gesture that was much less about Lucy Gray and more about his commitment to the capital cause. It's funny how Snow was assigned to Lucy Gray as her mentor, but from the moment she started spitting facts and giving him really good advice, Lucy Gray became his mentor. She saved him in more ways than just rescuing him from the arena. Under her guidance, Snow learns how powerful a good show can be. Throughout Songbirds and Snakes, we watched Snow on several occasions go out of his way to observe the effect that Lucy Gray's performance has on the audience members around him, like when he takes in the reactions of the academy students and faculty members during reaping day, or when he's in the hospital watching the nurses and Tigris get swept up by Lucy's ballad, or at the end of the 10th games, when he fully comprehends how truly powerful putting on a good performance can be, as everyone starts chanting Snow's words to free his tribute, the tribute that just stole their hearts. When Snow was asking if Lucy thought their connection was real, I think he was asking himself the same question. When Casca Highbottom and Snow were talking, like how people do sometimes, Snow was like, "Hey buddy, why do you hate me so much? You were friends with my dad." And then Casca Highbottom claims, "I thought I was too, but it turns out I was only someone he liked because he could use me." Coriolanus shares a lot of traits with his dad, and this is one of them. It's not that Coriolanus didn't care for Sejanus or Lucy Gray, but he was definitely drawn towards how he could use them, even if he wasn't fully aware of it. I think it was more something on a subconscious level, like how he got inside information about the Plinth Prize by being friends with Sejanus, or how he started making an impression on Dr. Gaul the more that Lucy Gray taught him how to properly entertain. Snow was thinking that he was falling in love with Lucy Gray, but in reality, he was most likely falling in love with what he was getting out of the relationship. Crassus used Highbottom's ideas to forward his own position in the capital, and his son is doing the same exact thing but with Lucy's ideas. Plus, I think it's a fair comparison to say that Snow is his dad because of everything that I just said, and Sejanus is Highbottom, as both Sejanus and Highbottom were under scrutiny for defending the districts and refusing to conform to the barbaric ideals of the capital. Sejanus was constantly freaking out about the games in Professor Demigloss's class, and Highbottom was failing out of Dr. Gaul's class back in the day because he hated her teachings as well. Snow is being torn apart by the life he always wanted in the capital, and sticking with the snakes, or living a more passive life and joining the songbirds in the trees like Lucy. It's fitting that Snow gave Lucy Gray his mother's scarf, as she became someone he valued as much, if not more, than his own mother. Snow replacing the compact's rose-scented powder with the rat poison was also a good indication of that, but it was all mostly emblematic that Lucy Gray is this embodiment of security and compassion, the thing that Snow is so desperately trying to cling on to. I remember when Strabo Plinth was reflecting on his memory of Mrs. Snow, Strabo claimed that she was the very definition of a lady, as she was very gracious to Mr. Plinth, even though everyone, and I mean everyone, hated him because he was from District 2. And then Strabo Plinth claimed that Sejanus singled Snow out to be his BFF, meaning Snow did have the compassion of his mother within him, and he ideally wanted to explore Lucy Gray's philosophy on life. Nonetheless, Lucy Gray and Coriolanus' relationship was the literal definition of a tragedy, because Coriolanus fell victim to the propaganda meant to keep the capital and the districts divided. Also, his parental figures like Gaul and Grandmam, they did not help. Grandmam would do quirky stuff like play the same recordings of the anthem Gem of Panem on national holidays, or just every single freaking morning, instilling this sense of patriotism on 5-year-old Coriolanus and 8-year-old Tigris. Grandmam's hate for the districts was so bad that she didn't care to remember the name of Plinth when Sejanus' mom came over for a visit regarding the disappearance of her son. Like, the woman was missing a child, and Grandma over here is like, well, you best be hitting the road. On the bright side, Snow's grandmother was the first to predict that Coriolanus was going to be president, as she kept saying it throughout his youth. In fact, she claimed that when Coriolanus is president, it's going to rain champagne every Tuesday. I know this was a joke, but I'm over here thinking, did Snow actually embrace the idea of Champagne Tuesdays? I don't know. After looking at the capital like one time, I'm assuming they did. Tigris, on the other hand, remembered that Mrs. Plinth sent a casserole over to the Snows after the whole... Regardless, Tigris, being a known advocate for somebody who doesn't want Coriolanus to turn into his father or his bitter as grandmother, she hated people like Dr. Gaul and what they were doing to Coryo. In her mind, Snow is someone who wouldn't hurt a fly. And then Gaul comes in and forces Coriolanus into the arena, resulting in Coriolanus having to kill Bobbin. And I think that Coryo liked killing Bobbin.
And it felt powerful.
Because it was the first time he stopped putting up this front, this shallow facade, and tapped into a more animalistic nature. It wasn't him wanting to be barbaric, it was just the first moment he truly felt in control. So in future moments, when he feels like he's no longer in control, he takes it to the same extreme and fires upon people like Mayfair, or even Lucy Gray. When Coriolanus was back in District 12 with Lucy Gray, he was still itching to get back to the capital. He wanted her to conform to his way of life, not the other way around. When Lucy Gray mentions the Katniss potato plan in front of Snow,
I think Katniss has a much nicer ring, don't you?
the music swells and everyone in the audience is like, whoa! That's the main character of the next movie if we're speaking chronologically. The first time I saw the scene, I thought it was a little cheese. It was kind of like when they mentioned JFK and Oppenheimer, teasing the expanded universe of US political figures. But upon the second viewing, I liked it because this moment highlights Snow's still lingering hatred for the districts and his aversion for adapting to their lifestyle. In the books, they implied this by using the Mockingjays. Snow hated this creature. From the second he saw it, he's like, I don't like that. He especially didn't like the sound of the Mockingjays repeating the melody of prisoners getting executed. After listening to Lucy Gray perform the song Deep in the Meadow, Snow noticed the lack of jabberjays and was starting to assume that the Mockingjays began reproducing without them. This propaganda-filled Peacekeeper innately hated how the Mockingjay was getting out of the capital's control, so he suggested to his commander that they use the Mockingjays as a form of target practice. Anyway, fast forward to after the whole pew pew Mayfair and Sejanus going like, So with Spruce, Sejanus, Mayfair, and Billy gone, Snow comes across the last of the evidence connecting him to this rebellion gone wrong. Snow thought he would be killed by taking the mayor's daughter out of the equation and conspiring with the rebels. When the rebels from the district surrounded the capital, Grandmam told her grandchildren, "Remember, children, we are but besieged. We have not surrendered." And then the capital ended up winning the war. So when Snow unpacked those weapons, I feel like he had a similar thought, something within telling him that he didn't need to surrender yet, and that there was still hope. Plus, Highbottom once said that Snow's mother somehow convinced herself that Crassus would give her freedom and love, but in the end, she would be tossed out of the frying pan and into the fire. After Snow lost Lucy Gray's trust, he went out searching for her, but all of her tracks led to his mother's orange scarf. The scarf was accompanied by a snake to bite him. Then dozens of mockingjays, Snow's least favorite creature, began to sing the hanging tree. This is the last song that Snow would ever hear Lucy Gray sing. It was about former District 12 coal miner named Arlo Chance, who was executed for crime. While his occupation was a coal miner, Arlo was still fighting the first rebellion. He thought it would hurt the capital by blowing up the mines to stop coal production. However, when carrying out his plan, he accidentally killed 3 innocent people. So Chance was executed at the hanging tree, as was tradition. Lucy leaves Snow with the song The Hanging Tree to let him know that she pieced together that Snow was responsible for the execution of the pacifist known as Sejanus Plinth, creating a whole new meaning to the line, "They say he murdered 3." In the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, it's written that Snow thought Lucy could fly around District 12 all she liked, but her and her mockingjays could never harm him again. And even after all these years, Snow had the same disdain on his face for a new victor from District 12 rocking a mockingjay pin. Plus, in the film version of Songbirds and Snakes, after Snow shoots Lucy, he picks up a golden earring of hers. It's gold, just like the mockingjay pin. So this line,
What a lovely pin.
hits so much harder. And for that reason, it's puzzling to me how, if you look very closely at this picture in Snow's office, you can spot what looks like a Victorian sketch of nature, but it's not a drawing of a creature that lived in Victorian times, or any actual times. No, instead, it was the Jabberjay. Crassus believed that his own military experiences in serving in the Peacekeepers enhanced his legitimacy in the family business, which was selling military weapons. Even though Coriolanus didn't go into the Peacekeepers voluntarily, it most certainly boosted his reputation at the university and added legitimacy to his position in his new kind of stepdad's family business. In fact, when Snow was walking through the halls of university, other students would look at him with envy, all because he served as a peacekeeper. It gave him an edge. After this internal struggle of choosing the life of a songbird or the life of a snake, Coriolanus finally came to the conclusion that the entire world is an arena, and we need the Hunger Games to remind everyone who we truly are. People like Lucy Gray, however, chose to see the good in people. By the way, this transformation was signified perfectly with the roses. You remember the roses that Snow is rocking during the first half of the film? At the beginning of the film, when Coriolanus is most capital driven, his grandmam gives him a red rose. And when greeting Lucy at the train station, Snow is holding a white rose representing his family, as this train station was the same place that he waited for his dad. And this is also where Lucy Gray opens up about her own family.
When I was little, my mama used to bathe me in buttermilk and rose petals.
And during the games, Coriolanus has an orange rose to match Lucy Gray's dress, representing how keeping Lucy Gray alive was his main priority at that time. And we all know by now that Snow decided to rock the white roses in the end. According to set decorator Larry Diaz, the white rose is a symbol of purity, the exact opposite of who Snow is. An interesting observation I observed while observing the book was how Grandmam became more out of it, for lack of a better term, specifically becoming more out of it when Snow left to become a peacekeeper in the worst district. In Tigris's letter, Grandmam reportedly asked like 2 times in one day when Coryo would be home, and if they should wait for him to return for dinner, kind of forgetting that the peacekeepers kind of have a 20-year obligation to wherever they get stationed in the districts. Tigris and Coriolanus were like, who's gonna tell her? Because it's not going to be me. But when Snow returns from District 12, Grandmam, the person who is emblematic of all this blind patriotism towards the capital, is suddenly better. It's funny how Snow, Gaul, and all these other people viewed the District-borns as savages. That's why they rolled with the Hunger Games, to display the animalistic nature of humans and remind everyone who they truly are, hence keeping the tributes in a monkey cage at the zoo. Yet the people who they considered savages, and the people who they put in an unprecedented, awful survival situation situation, ended up showing more humanity than anyone in the capital. Lamina showed mercy to Marcus by climbing the rocks and putting him out of his misery, just so she could end his punishment of him being publicly displayed like that. Or Reaper, for example, as he respectfully laid out the tributes' bodies and covered them with the capital flag. And all of this is really helping support Lucy Gray's philosophy. I don't know, maybe Tigris's radical transformation of mimicking a tiger to the point of potential E. coli poisoning was symbolic of how the capital citizens were truly the animals here. Plus, it sucks to learn that Lucy claimed that the rat poison was her idea and the compact was her token. She took the fall for Snow. The only reason Coriolanus got caught cheating was due to the initials on his dad's handkerchief that he threw into the snake pit. This was an issue because Crassus's middle name was Xanthos, and apparently not a lot of people in this Greek-themed society have a middle name that starts with X. I guess all that matters is that Snow avoided becoming dead in the woods of District 12, unlike his dad. By the way, the last time we see Gaul, she's working on the squid monster mutt, as well as these very threatening goldfish mutts, but mainly the squid. Let's focus on the squid. We know that Meggs was the victor of the 11th Hunger Games, and why was that? Why did she win? I'm gonna assume that a lot of parts of the arena for the 11th Games were submerged in water. That's like my theory. And those areas of water were most likely accompanied by this aquatic mutt. And this would explain why Meggs, being from District 4, also known as the District of Swimming and Fishing Skills, would be the winner that year, as she would have the skill set to take down this very threatening looking creature. After his return to the capital, Snow was taken in by the Plinths. In the book, Snow had a much closer relationship with Mr. Plinth than this nod that they gave you in the film. Coriolanus felt the same awkwardness and anxiety around Mr. Plinth that he once felt around his own father, so I guess he was given a similar father figure in the end. Snow would be an heir to the Plinth fortune, but he was 18, so even though he's not technically adopted, he was debating whether or not to call them Ma and Pa, but he settled for calling Strabo Plinth Sir. And in a way, Snow was reclaiming his father's munitions empire. And even though he was consuming the Plinth's empire, Snow knew that he would never trade his last name for anything. Also, Snow would eventually refer to Mrs. Plinth as Ma, and that's just very disturbing. Strabo bought the Snow's apartment, so the OG crew like Tigris and Grandmam could live there in the proper conditions that they had before the Dark Days. The Plinths also paid for Snow's tuition, a helper for Grandmam, as well as a cook. A brand new cook. Strabo and Coriolanus were apparently a good fit together. Strabo was excited to give Snow advice, and Snow was excited to take it. I don't mean to ruin Sejanus' life, but you could say that Snow was the son Strabo Plinth always wanted. It gets more interesting because apparently Snow still viewed Strabo as district scum. But in the meantime, the wealth and the money surprisingly helped Coriolanus focus on his new Gamemaker internship, as well as a special honors class in military strategy with Dr. Gaul. This is where they improved on the games, like having more stakes for people in the districts, like everyone receiving a parcel of food if their tribute wins, as well as Victor's Village, a town with elegant homes specifically made for victors, as the name would suggest. Tigris made Snow think about just how alone his tribute Lucy Gray must have felt, that he should show her how much she's valued. So he ends up turning the tribute's arrival at the capital from this into this. During the 70-something years, I strongly suspect that Snow got together with Livia Cardew, as in she became the first lady at one point, and for good reason too. After dating Lucy Gray Baird, Snow didn't like the vulnerability and the stupidity that came with love, so he picked someone who he thought had no capable means of ever swaying his heart. So Coriolanus chose a girl from the academy who called him self-absorbed and who tried to get him kicked out of the 10th Hunger Games on several occasions. Clearly the perfect choice for a spouse. And this would explain why Snow has a granddaughter, but I don't know who the heck these people are. Producer of the Hunger Games, Brian Unclis, claimed that Plutarch has a unique understanding of the way in which entertainment can be used to manipulate the masses. He is a master at propaganda, which is why Snow is so willing to take advice from him. Snow never stopped improving on the games, but it was only by listening to people like Lucy Gray, or Tigris, or Plutarch that allowed him to truly perfect it. The man who played evil Santa Claus, Donald Sutherland, went on to talk about the world Snow created. It's a society that was created by force. It's like it's made of paper. It's that fragile. One spark can lead to a fire. So now that we know how well Snow made this very stable society, let's move on to chapter 2 of 57, titled The Fall of Snow. During the time between the 10th Games and the 74th Games, Snow took after Dr. Gaul in a way that he wasn't the front man. He left that up to the Flickermans or the Gamemakers. Instead, Snow would operate from behind the scenes. He keeps the capital residents happy by giving them amazing feasts, where if you eat too much, you can drink something to make you vibrant violently throw up in the bathroom. And then after that shameful 5 minutes of hell, you can eloquently return to the party in order to shove more food into your face. Speaking of that party, according to Catching Fire, the official illustrated movie companion, the presidential feast consisted of roughly 200 feet of buffet tables filled with food and a lot of food. Honestly, it was full of anything you could think of, and things you could never dream of. This shameful act of gluttony was inspired by a runway show's feast production designer Phil Messina once witnessed, but he wanted to make it many times bigger to show off the sheer abundance of food. Because for practical reasons, it was meant to feed over 200 party guests, 40 musicians, 12 A-boxes, the fire breathers, the presidential guards, and a partridge in a pear tree. The production of The Hunger Games loved using a lot of extras. In the first movie, they had about 400 capital extras, and V. Neal was helping make sure every single one of them looked perfect. The entire team would end up taking 9.5 hours to get them all into makeup and wardrobe, which is insane. The presidential mansion party was filmed at the Swan House, an elegant classical mansion built in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia in 1928 by Edward and Emily Inman, the heirs to a cotton fortune. It's set back from the street by a long driveway, and at the end of that long driveway you can find a cascading fountain, a terrace lawn, and gorgeous formal gardens. The inside of the house is as elegant as the exterior. Set decorator Larry Diaz described the style of the place as very classic, sort of dictatorial. Snow is surrounded by antiques, crystal chandeliers, and other finery. Basically, it's a beautiful place with a shameful history, but the structure of the house is really perfect for what they needed. Elizabeth Banks went on to say that we're imagining a future world, but we're basing it on places from the past. You can really imagine that this home would survive through hundreds of years of turmoil. Also, the place being named the Swan House was coincidentally a fitting name for a series that has a reoccurring theme of songbirds. The guests at the party that we're still talking about were very important people, from artists to bankers, and they were all wrapped in overindulgent, nonsensical trappings that give me a severe headache from looking at them. President Snow rocks a more military aesthetic while staying fashionable and not completely polarizing. Costume designer Judiana Makovsky went on to say that Donald Sutherland is a very elegant man, and of course we're going to go with his elegance. We wanted him to be imposing, but we didn't want him to look like the rest of the Capitol with outrageous fashions. We thought that he's above all that. He can do whatever he wants because he's a freaking lion, a majestic lion. And while we're on the topic of just reading out interviews right now, I really liked reading V. Neal explaining how they designed Snow's look. She claimed that I sat and worked for the entire day, and after we tried all these things on him, I said, what if we make your eyebrows all white to match the hair? He looks like he's all warm and fuzzy when in fact he's the most evil of them all. I don't know whether or not you read the first Hunger Games book in the trilogy, but the character of Snow was barely in it. According to producer Robin Bissell, the film's director Gary Ross was talking about the role of Snow to Donald Sutherland. Gary was all like, okay, Donald, regarding your role in the Hunger Games, you just need to show up to set for like a couple of days. You don't really have any screen time. All you have to do is show up as the president and make one speech. And Donald Sutherland said, no, Gary. No, I really want to do it. Bissell felt that Sutherland truly understood the character of Snow and how he was the embodiment of the Capitol, and Sutherland saw what he needed to do with the character. And when Ross and Sutherland were in communication with each other, Ross had the idea to add 2 additional scenes with Snow and Seneca Crane. And I, for one, love that they added these 2 scenes because in retrospect, it kind of shows us how much Snow has become like Dr. Gaul and how he treats his mentees in a similar fashion as her. Snow and Katniss have a lot in common. They both hate each other more than anything on Panem. That's the first thing they have in common. And when looking at their individual histories, you can find a good amount of commonalities. Both had similar upbringings. Like Katniss had to hunt in the woods to provide for her family, even though poaching was illegal. Snow would have to go on to hide things like crates of dried lima beans throughout his entire apartment because hoarding was illegal. And whether it was lima beans or deer, they both had to ration their food and find a way to trade it during a little thing called surviving. Snow hated Katniss for a lot of reasons. The most significant reason, however, would be that she became the literal symbol for the Second Rebellion, which was a rebellion meant to tear down his entire empire and everything he's ever built. Like Katniss, Lucy was a tribute from 12, but Snow's war flashbacks to Lucy Gray Baird didn't stop there. The first thing that must have truly reminded Snow of Lucy Gray was when Katniss sang Deep in the Meadow to Rue. Back in the day, Lucy sang Deep in the Meadow to Snow, and while listening, Snow's anxieties started to melt away. It was a song that made him appreciate the beautiful nature surrounding him in District 12, and even made him consider giving up wealth and money and power in order to run off into the woods with Lucy Gray. On top of that, listening to Lucy Gray Baird perform this song reminded him of his mother singing to him when he was just a little potato. Why did Snow eventually fall? I feel like that's the main point of this video and I just haven't addressed it yet. Well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons would be Plutarch Heavensby, a master of propaganda. Plutarch played a huge role in turning the Mockingjay into the main symbol of the Second Rebellion. And you know what? Knowing how much the Mockingjays and Jabberjays mocked Snow after Lucy abandoned him, I found it interesting that Snow didn't immediately ban the Mockingjay symbol due to his own personal hatred for the bird and his uncomfortable memories with it. I mean, why not take after previous mentors like Commander Hoff of District 12's Peacekeepers, who prohibited anyone from singing the song The Hanging Tree because he deemed it too rebellious. Snow eventually did ban the Mockingjay symbol after everyone in the capital was obsessed with it. Even people like his granddaughter were trying to make herself look more like Katniss. But by the time he banned the symbol, it was too late because of the resistance and stuff. You know what? But then again, I can understand why Snow didn't just outright ban the symbol at first, because he was a more calculated leader by the time of the 74th Hunger Games. He went from eliminating Haymitch's family over a stunt that he pulled in the arena to not fully eliminating Katniss's family for the stunt that she pulled in the arena, because if District 11 showed us anything, it's what bad PR can do. Snow made the same mistake that the previous higher-ups in the capital made. The capital intended for the Jabberjays, aka the Mockingjays, to die out, the same way that they wanted songbirds like Lucy Gray to also die out. When it came to Gray, they took out her Covey's ability to travel, to sing certain songs, and to even keep their family together. And even when people like Dr. Gaul erased the memory of Lucy Gray by destroying any copy of the 10th Hunger Games, Lucy Gray's songs like Deep in the Meadow and The Hanging Tree live on. Because during the Second Rebellion, Katniss sings Deep in the Meadow to Rue, and we all know what happens in District 11. And in Mockingjay, Katniss sings The Hanging Tree, a song that prompts the rebels to blow up the dam powering the capital. Oh, by the way, before Lucy Gray's interview during the 10th Games, she claims that the show's not over until the Mockingjay sings. While we don't see Snow's reaction to Katniss singing The Hanging Tree, I'd like to imagine that he thought of Lucy's words when watching this performance. If you ask me, Snow's fatal flaw was underestimating the resilient nature of the songbirds like the Mockingjay. We don't know a lot of details about how Snow got to the position of president/dictator, but we know that Coriolanus definitely got to that position by using the Hunger Games, but also poisoning a lot of people. He was willing to take out people who were not just threats, but people he thought may be a threat one day in the future, possibly. After surrounding himself with nothing but yes men and then people telling him what he wants to hear, that definitely worked against him. Remember that awkward moment where Snow was opening up his mansion to the refugees for their safety, but it was really for Snow's protection because he basically wanted to form a human shield around his place? Because if he really wanted to safeguard his citizens, he would have just told them to go down into a bunker somewhere, and then President Coin approved the whole hovercraft with the seal of the capital, dropping bombs disguised as emergency rations onto the capital citizens. And then Prim shows up and is all like, I'm a medic and I'm here to heal people. And then everyone was asking themselves, hey, wait a sec, what the heck, Prim? You're only 13, you have to be 14 years old to be a soldier in District 13. As well as asking ourselves, what the heck is she doing so close to the capital? And then we figure out from Snow that Coin was most likely the one to grant Prim the title of soldier, even though she was too young to receive it, because basically Coin wanted to record Prim's death to show to everyone in the districts, especially Katniss Everdeen, that evil Snow kicked Prim out of the chat room so that Coin could have everyone on her side. And then it ended up being successful because the last of Snow's people turned on him. You remember that awkward moment? Well, Snow would play mind games with Katniss because of the whole burning hatred for her. He would do stuff like leaving white roses in her Victor's village house or outside of District 13. He was a real jerk, you know, but you have to give him credit where credit is due. Snow never really lied to Katniss.
My dear, I think we can make this so much simpler if we agree not to lie to each other. What do you think?
So I guess he really did learn from his mistake with Lucy Gray.
Do not lie to me.
Because Snow never gave Katniss a reason not to trust the validity of his words, giving her every reason to believe that Snow was telling the truth when he said that Coin was the one who blew up Prim, causing Katniss to shoot the arrow into Coin, thus abolishing the Hunger Games for good. So I mean, I guess something good came out of his dictatorship.